saying the metric of this debate is something broadly like leading a more enriching life, we want to note that you could literally be born as anyone with any subjective possible preferences or outlooks on life. I think when we could literally be born with anyone with any preferences, there are two main things that I think are good no matter who you are. A, your ability to act on the world, and two, the ability to choose your path, right? To choose who you are, what your preferences are, and your ability to pursue them in the first place. I think broadly, I'm going to prove to you a couple of things. Your ability to act in terms of your influence over others, as well as your insulation from malicious influences of other people around you that could possibly want to harm you. Secondly, I'm going to talk to you about your ability to pursue your true preferences, right? For example, like I want to note that the way memories form who we are, right? Note that like memories inform like a perception of danger, a perception of what is valuable in life, etc. The problem with status quo is that we literally have no control over the process of how we choose and form memories, right? Right now, sure, like our like society imparts memories upon us. We don't really have a say in that. But furthermore, we don't have an ability to choose what memories we degrade, right? What memories we eventually lose. So this means that our ability to choose who we are and what we value in life is severely limited. For example, I may choose that I really value friendship, but because I experienced a traumatizing event and that's the only thing I remember, and all my previous positive memories I arbitrarily lose because I have no control over this process, that means my ability to form trust with other people is severely eroded. That's the kind of situation I'm talking about. Two arguments for you today. Number one, your ability to choose who you are. Number two, the effect of how it affects relationships around you. Number one, the ability to choose who you are. Note the comparative they have to stand by is an arbitrary loss in memories, which is completely damaging, right? The comparative is just that no one has control over the process of how they lose their memories. Note that two things could occur. Like the statement is just like, look, number one, we tend to remember negative memories really, really vividly. There's a biological reason for this. It's because our brains are really risk averse, right? They want to protect us from future possible things that could harm us, which means it has every incentive to hang on to negative memories and remember them in very vivid detail. Because of that survival instinct, it will help us in the future, right? This means that we remember vivid things, and this tends to discard positive memories that contradict that negative experience. For example, I may remember something where it's like I chose to trust someone untrustworthy, like to the extent that my brain no longer wants that danger to ever happen to me again. It disregards all the positive memories that I have where I was able to trust someone and it went okay, right? Second scenario that could possibly happen, that you could have the suppression of negative memories. The negative memory could be so intense such that your brain naturally suppresses it in order to preserve itself. The problem with this is that you often develop mental illnesses or mental disorders because of that negative trauma, except now you are anxious and you don't know how to address it because you do not know the memory associated with it and therefore do not know even what is causing it. How do we then change that, right? To the extent that you now have perfect recall, you no longer have the distortions in memory, right? So I think we can, on that first scenario that I pointed out, where you have negative memories super vividly, I think that changes to the extent that you can now choose memories, like choose the memories to value, right? Depending on the subjective individual and the life that they choose, they may choose to, for example, remember the negative memories and value them at a higher degree simply because they care about preservation. Or maybe you have, for example, an individual who wants to forgive and rehabilitate and chooses to focus on the positive memories. Now you actually have that degree of choice because you remember everything vividly and you can extrapolate whatever benefit you, right? So you can just, like the individual is best placed to make that value judgment about which memories they place a higher order of importance on. Right now, they literally have no choices whatsoever. Furthermore, I think like to the extent in the second scenario I identified, right, that negative suppressed memories tend to come back to bite you in the ass. Now you have more ability to address those bad memories because number one, you remember them as they happen, completely undistorted. Furthermore, they are unsuppressed. You can actually know what is causing your anxiety, right? So note that so number one, I can address it, but furthermore, the fact that it's undistorted makes a huge difference. For example, I have very scary memories as a child. It's very good for me to, for example, remember certain family members not as undefeatable monsters, but rather as, for example, adults, and understand that now, because I am full grown, I have more ability to protect myself, right? I no longer have the distortions in memories that make them seem far more undefeatable and powerful than they are. So therefore, I have more ability to recognize my own power and agency over future situations. Second argument I want to give to you, your ability to affect relations on others and your ability to insulate yourself from bad malicious actors. Before I go on, closing, do you have anything?
Yeah, Clint, just to clarify, not to make this debate super messy, there's a difference between remembering and seeing what happened. So your version of different memories can change every year. I can be happy speaking this tournament, sad speaking this tournament, regret speaking this tournament, depending on the year. So you can't just fiat a constant perspective of the memory.
Yeah. No, so for example, I remember things exactly as they happen, but I can extrapolate any value I want from it, right? For example, right now, like I may remember Oxford IB as this great intervarsity that I did really well at, right? So this benefits me at this exact moment because I still want to get good at debating and adds to the fuel of my motivation to get better. In maybe 5 years down the line, I may regret doing Oxford intervarsity because I was just like, hey, I should have focused on my journalistic career much more. That benefits me in that future time frame, and I am best able to make that value judgment within the context I am in, right? So again, I don't think like I think I addressed this pretty clearly before in my speech. Going on, so affects how the relations you have over you. First here, affects your ability to influence others. To the extent that you have the ability to perfectly recall, I think people trust you as a source. Look, you may just be born as an evil individual with some malicious intent. If you're an evil kind of person, you can now dictate events to other people to the extent they trust you to have perfect recall. You can do things like, hey, actually, I did nothing wrong. I arrived exactly at 2 p.m. I didn't arrive at 2:15 and I was never late for a meeting to the cinema or something. And so you were actually wrong. You have to apologize. If you want to do that, now you have the ability to do that and enrich your life. But maybe you're a good person, right? Now you have more ability to, for example, help others because of your perfect recall, right? And you're trusted as that source and your ability to interfere in other people's lives for the good, right? For example, you could be trusted to do things like mediate conflicts by retelling objective events that happen and helping people resolve that and helping your friends and enriching your life. Second tier, your ability to insulate yourself from malicious influence, right? The worst thing that could possibly, like, I think a lot of terrible things happen to you because people constantly gaslight you, right? They constantly make you doubt your own perspective of reality and make you doubt yourself. I think now you have more ability to resist those bad actors, right? Because these bad actors are ones that lead you to believe, for example, because you have a distorted remembrance of memories, that you are a bad person, that you're irrational, that you are crazy. I think now you have more ability to recognize this toxicity when it happens because you understand exactly what happened and that they are lying, and you are able to leave those toxic relationships, right? And at least when those happen, you have more ability to assert yourself because you understand, have full assurance in your conception of reality, right? Because of this, you're more able to insulate yourself from negative influences and just like relate to people who are good for you. For all these reasons, I told you why you live a much more enriching life, have maximization of freedom. OG is the one that takes this debate.
Great. I would like to thank the Prime Minister for their speech. I would like to invite the Leader of the Opposition to deliver their speech. Here.
Am I audible?
Yeah.
Awesome. On opening opposition, our thesis is very simple. For people to be able to healthily and rationally commit to narratives about their lives and their relations, they have to be able to let go of the petty stuff that annoyed them in the moment or the small jolts of happiness that might contravene their real rational aversion to a person or an ideology. We think that this specific condition limits your capacity to act upon any preferences you might have. I want to clarify something about memory at the top. It just isn't the case that you don't have control over your memories. If someone annoys you, people all the time think, I'll just try to forgive and forget. I'll try to focus on the good things they do for me now. And sure, in the moment, that might be inauthentic, or both memories might still exist. But over time, on our side, good memories that you were deliberately focusing on and creating now are constantly compared against the bad ones to the point where you dull the effect of that initial annoyance. On their side, that initial annoyance or anger that you feel is just as annoying 10 years ago as it is right now. Briefly, I want to talk about the last thing the opening government team said, because I think everything else interacts. On the evil person conspiracy theory at the end of their speech and on gaslighting. First of all, I think most people in most instances do know they're being gaslit. So I think the question of who's being seen as more credible is not likely to be changed on either side of the house. Two, I don't think people who are evil are going to be able to lie all the time. Social media, other people's vivid memories as well, are likely to contravene any evil narratives. And three, if any individual person is caught lying about their hyper-specific memories, they can never be trusted again. So I think this collapses on itself. Let's talk about why short memory spans are really good. A number of reasons. First is trauma. I think it's obviously good for people to be able to forget traumatic experiences. This, I think, is a unique benefit of OP, since in a lot of cases, people are able to involuntarily or voluntarily forget traumatic experiences. I think the way that people deal with trauma right now is that they either outright forget, which is impossible on Gov, or they know the event happened, but they don't remember what happened in the seconds or the minutes or the days leading afterwards. So the viscerality or the harshness of the experience goes way down. OO says, OG says, you can process memories because you remember the event. The question is that they haven't answered is whether or not what you need to reckon with that event is the ripple effects of all the pain that you felt post-trauma. In general, I think it is harder to process and forget difficult or unpleasant things when the viscerality of that literally stays with you all the time. This is problematic because I think it kneecaps the ability of a lot of people to function in society since they're constantly re-traumatized by a vivid memory. In a less problematic, but I think still problematic way, this is also symmetric on the other end for euphoria, where you're less likely to be aspirational or interested in trying new things or working on yourself if you can constantly vividly remember your perfect glory days, like that one time you made it to a semifinals of an online debate tournament. The second thing I want to talk about is information overload. I think it's really hard for people to process all these information. I just think brains have a limited bandwidth. You're constantly bombarded with sensory information that you simply don't have the capacity to process. Notice that the ability to recall memories does not come with an increased cognitive capacity to process these memories. Often being intelligent or capable relies on the selective pruning of information to choose what is most relevant to you. This means it becomes incredibly difficult to learn from mistakes on Gov, because even if Gov wants to say that you can direct your life towards pleasure or against pain, this is harder to do when you literally struggle to process the information as to why you might have failed, for instance. You may be obsessed with the minute details of the failure rather than the general causal reason. For example, if you're unlikely to get into graduate school, it might be because you're hyper-focused on one specific score or one specific grade. I think it makes it much harder to make a general case about being unprepared for the process as a whole at the deputy leader of opposition. I think generalizing causality is important for people to learn from mistakes, and this gets destroyed on their side of the house. The third thing I want to talk about is risk. I think it's way more likely that on their side of the house, you are unable to take healthy risks and do take unhealthy ones. It is more likely that you don't even get close to things that backfired on you, even if those things made sense ex ante, like asking that person out or going to that place that you otherwise wouldn't have, because ex ante, you have good justifications to do so. And even now you might have good justifications to do so, but the small reasoning and the small annoyances and even the visceral experiences that you face then deter you from ever making those risks again. I think it makes it much harder for people to actualize on any of the preferences that they want to per opening government's desires. The last thing I want to talk about is narrative construction and why that gets screwed on their side. I think this is the most important argument. Here's what happens on our side of the house. Narrative construction about ideology, about friendships, about emotions, even are based on people selectively prioritizing certain memories and often forgetting things that contravene their conclusions. This argument is true for all of your beliefs about everything. In order to be empathetic, your memories are constructed in a way where all the good feelings you had when you were empathetic are prioritized, and the times you got screwed over for being empathetic are minimized or rationalized. In order to be someone's friend, you think about all the positive memories, and all the negative ones, like the petty memories or annoyances, like if they oversleep and you miss a trip or something, get forgotten. In order to commit to any worldview, you prioritize certain memories and willfully forget or deprioritize others. Crucially, you minimize certain small details that don't cohere with your worldview. This is almost impossible to happen on Gov because the viscerality of the annoyance you felt in that one counterexample stays as vivid as possible and doesn't ever get dulled. This makes it hard for people to commit to narratives because they can't commit to their views about friendship or religion because they can always think of that perfect counterexample and experience it with viscerality. Before I move on, I'll take a POI from closing.
The perfect counterexample in the perfect day only exists on opposition's side when one memory becomes super salient because of the visceral emotion related to it.
I think it's fine for people to think they had a great day without thinking about, but what about that time where I screwed up tying my shoelace? That was really annoying. What about that time I hit a red light? That was really annoying. I think it's fine for people to view their childhood heroes as heroes because I think that makes their lives and their commitments to narratives about there are good people in the world that deserve my care actually quite strong. On your side, you think about all the times your mom annoyed you and you're like, well, it's impossible for me to love this person because of that one experience in 8th grade where they didn't let me hang out with my friends and that pissed me off so deeply. I think this lack of belief is really harmful. You just lack beliefs that give your life meaning. You're more likely to compromise on your relationships and your friendships. Narrative construction is crucially important to developing viable moral systems, for example. You need to be able to abstract away from your direct experiences into more general moral principles and apply them to other instances. This gets harder on their side of the house. Why? Because it's more likely that any narrative that you do settle on, if you do settle on a narrative, is entirely dogmatic because it's justified by the vivid annoyance that you did feel in that one instance. Having vivid memories about what it felt like for a certain person to hurt you, or in most instances annoyed you, is precisely the type of thing that keeps you committed to the negative or unfairly positive beliefs you might have had about that person. Indeed, having very vivid memories may make you more dogmatic in a way that you recall very specifically the way it felt for somebody to hurt you. And it means you're more committed to bad worldviews and are not flexible in the way that you construct narratives in a healthy and sustainable way. We commit to beliefs in a long-term way that allows people to structure their realities. On their side, you are always able to either commit to the worst views or ones that constantly collapse the ones you currently have. Very proud to oppose.
Cool. I would like to thank the leader of opposition for their speech. I would like to invite the Deputy Prime Minister to deliver her speech. Here.
Am I still audible?
Yeah.
I'm going to talk about two things in this speech. Number one, on the practical impacts, that is why you are generally going to be happier and you are more likely to be able to pursue your goals in life. Secondly, independently of that, why do we think that, like, principally, you're just going to maximize your agency no matter what your actual practical interests as that random individual are. Couple of responses extraneously at the start. Number one, I just want to address like the response that they gave on the point of gaslighting, right? Their response is on the fact that you are now able to control and protect yourself against gaslighting is like people generally know that they are being gaslit. Like I generally don't understand the response so far as if that were true, then probably gaslighting would not be a problem that many people face within their like interpersonal relationship constantly, right? The reason as to why you do not know they are being gaslit is because the people who are convincing you that you were mistaken by your own memories in order to push you on their side and try to exert the way that you are doubting yourself and conceptualizing of your own sanity are then to people who you trust, right? It's your friend, it's your significant other, which is why you are likely to buy into those narratives. You do not know that you are being gaslit until something like it gets exposed much later when you realize it. On our side, you get to protect yourself from this sort of toxicity very early on. We think insofar as this tends to be a problem that is quite massive, we think that's a big harm that they just needed to address. Secondly, on like the idea about like picking memories and being able to construct your narratives. Three responses to this. Number one, I think they just asserted that this is a power that people have under the status quo, and I really do not buy it. I think that the way that your memories fade, and I'm going to talk about that later, tend to be quite random or arbitrary in a way that you can't just simply control. Secondly, note that like, the whole narrative construction thing is the other way around. It's not like you first pick a narrative and then you pick your memories. Opposite. Based on your memories that you have, then you go and construct your narratives. This also buys into the principle of agency, because now when you are more informed and you have more memories to build on, the more freedom you are able to construct the narrative that you want to have. But like, thirdly, just like you can still exert this influence on our side of the house, right? Like, for example, when you are nostalgic, you can choose to revisit the same variable memory and increase the prominence of it and not just revisit the bad ones as much. I just do not understand why this is something that's so comparative on that side of the house. I think if anything, it's asymmetrically false on ours. Let's then talk about the practical stuff and why
you are generally going to be happier. And I'm going to address like all that points about trauma in this, because I would want to know that the framing that Jacqueline already gives you is that negative memories tend to have much higher prominence on their side of the house. So all the negative stuff is non-comparative. There are two ways in which the brain can deal with negative memories. Number one, it's the defense mechanism. This is that the trauma stuff that they want to talk about. This is the fact when the brain already makes it a really, really vivid memory in a vivid detail, because they want you to be constantly hypervigilant, constantly memorize that event to prevent it from happening again, right? Like all those like feelings, like the visceral pain that you might have felt, or like the even like when they talk about like stuff like embarrassment and annoyance, right? Like irrelevant on that, but those are also things that tend to be quite viscerally like sticking in your brain for your brain to try to prevent you from this to happen again. For all those reasons, that's the brain is actively on their side, already making these memories in a vivid detail. The comparative then becomes this, right? On their side, you still remember negative memories to the vivid detail anyway, but you are losing disproportionately the ones that are happy or the ones that are just like nice. Note that like when it comes to like the specifically trauma stuff, on their side, the reason why trauma becomes so incredibly powerful is because that's the only thing that you can actively recall. Because like you can't recall anything positive alongside of it. Like your entire like childhood just seems like something incredibly dark when there's nothing that you can pinpoint that can make you happier or that can make you think that there was something like some light in that darkness. On our side, this is something that changes, right? On our side, you obviously still will have memories of those bad things, but you have also memories of the good things alongside of it. What is then changes? I think just on like very, very broad level, just like your general happiness just becomes bigger, right? Because the way that we go around, like in our day-to-day life, like we just do randomly recall memories, right? I'm gonna hear a song, I'm gonna remember something, or like I'm gonna like hear whatever sound, see a face of a friend, I'm gonna recall a memory. Now, note that what happens on their side is disproportionately recalls the bad memories, because those are the ones that are ingrained in your brain much more. On our side, this becomes much more balanced. This is trivial, but it means that like the things that you are seeing and thinking about in your day just becomes more positive on balance. What this means that you are just happier overall. So if you care about on what side people are better able to deal with things like traumas or things like negative memories, I think we are winning on our side. But we also tell you the second thing, right? We tell you that the second way that the brain can technically deal with negative memories is to just distort them or completely suppress them. We think that the problem with that is that in that situation, it doesn't allow you to actively confront it. Like, for example, you see that like your body is reacting and panicking about something, but you can't recall the memory that is causing it, right? Or you just like, it's completely distorted. So you remember something as being too monstrous and too scary without being able to actually go and recall the concrete detail that can inform the way that you can deal with that particular traumatic event, right? On our side, again, even in this case, this gets better, right? Because you are actually able to recall these things, either recall them at all, meaning that you do not have that like weird insecurity about what's going on, but or you are able to actually confront it in the way that it occurred in reality. We think because of that, you're just much more likely to be able to deal with memories better. Before I talk about the furthering of goals, does opening have anything? Closing?
Don't you feel like really lonely when you remember everything, but everyone you had memories with remembers nothing?
Well, then I'm going to remind them, like, I don't know. I do not think that's going to be relevant. Let's see what you say in the extension. Let's talk about the furthering of goals. And I would note that opening opposition does not engage with that at all. But I would posit it as obviously incredibly important in a way that you are able to engage with your life, right? Like we tell you that like no matter what kind of person you are, whether you are evil or whether you are like super nice, on both sides, you're much more likely to get your goals through. Like if you are evil, you can probably manipulate people quite well. If you are a good person, you are probably someone who is able to get trust of other people and build stronger relationships. You are someone who can help through the ability of recall memories, or you can just be like really professionally successful, right? Like if you are going to be like a journalist or something, then you are probably much more successful in things like recalling specific memories or being able to describe things in vivid detail when you went to report on something. I think for all those reasons, you're probably much more likely to have better life. But I would also posit that even if you don't buy any of this, you always have more agency insofar as you can build on you have all the memories that informed who you are actually visually in your head constantly, meaning that you can construct your narratives, you can choose your future better. This is how, independently of outcome, still vote opening off.
Cool. I would like to thank Deputy Prime Minister for her speech. I would like to invite the Deputy Leader of the Opposition to deliver their speech. Here.
Okay, can everyone hear me? I know I'm a little bit quiet. I don't know how to fix that issue, so sorry about that.
Oh yeah, you already have a mic on you. I mean, I can hear you fine because my volume is like completely up. So if
other people have issues with being able to hear me, I just recommend turning the volume up for my speech and then turning it back down for other people's.
wait, I think CG can't hear you.
I will just shout as loud as I can. How about that?
I think that works as well. If it doesn't, then CG, if you still can't hear him well, then we'll figure something out with you guys getting headphones or doing something. But start from now, try be really loud, and then we'll see.
I think I agree with Seneca when he says that we suffer more in imagination than we suffer in reality. Our content operates at a fairly high philosophical level, but I'd invite you to think about the incredible variety of examples of personal narratives about morality and about things that inform our decision making that we can construct. I have a personal narrative that Roger Federer is the greatest tennis player of all time. This has provided me a great source of meaning in my life, or less jokingly, that constant curiosity is vital to a healthy and engaging life. When they said that narratives don't matter and that the ability to abstract away from minutia and details doesn't matter, don't believe them. It absolutely matters. Check this against your intuitions. Let me be very clear. Humans have quite limited cognitive capacities, and the motion doesn't say that these capacities increase when we become more able to remember specific details. We forget details, I contend, for a reason, which is that we want to open up the brain for new experiences and also to crucially forget certain things in order to abstract away from that detail and construct general principles about it. This is a cognitive claim that we advance, and I think that this is very, very core. I think in the rough analogy of a computer, right, between the brain and the computer, you have limited bandwidth or limited space to hold all these different memories, which means that I think at a certain point, just the simple claim that you begin to crowd out things that are important and you can't actually allocate bandwidth towards things like decision making and learning from your mistakes does become very difficult for them, even in a very simple and practical sense. Why do we actually forget, and what do we forget? We made two claims about what we forget on our side of the house. One is you forget the viscerality of experience. The edge gets dulled. This is important when we think about trauma, because even if it is the case that you will always remember the trauma to some degree, and I don't think that the suppression that they talk about will happen in the way that they talk about it, I'm going to get to that later, but the edge of what actually happened to you gets dulled on our side of the house, because you can't remember the specific smell of that specific moment, or how it specifically felt on your knee when you fell from your bike. This type of thing over time gets less and less visceral. Second, you forget minute details, the type of thing that causes cognitive overload and handicaps your ability to make the types of abstract generalizations that are so key to a healthy life. These are the type of things that we tend to forget. I forget what color my pencil was the other day. That's important for me to be able to forget because it's not important. What was our content, and what did we bring to you in this debate? First, we talked about trauma. Second, we talked about personal improvement. Third, narrative construction. And fourth, morality. I'm going to defend these ideas and advance why they're the most important in a second. But first, let's respond to OG. They say, we can't cultivate memories and choose to evaluate certain things. This is bad. I would say you can cultivate some memories, as Shreya says. You can also intentionally refract memories in different emotional lenses, depending on how you're doing at that particular moment. So you do have that ability on our side of the house. Then they also say if you suppress bad memories or forget them and you have the natural biological response that 99% of people currently do, that renders you unable to learn from them. I don't think that this is the likely instantiation of what suppressing bad memories actually means. It means that you suppress details, but you don't suppress necessarily that the event happened to you or that there was some causal chain that prompted that event from happening. I think that is the type of thing that gets more difficult on their side of the house because you can't generalize about the experience and you're obsessed with the details that don't actually matter. Their second argument is about worse relationships. Now, I think that their arguments subsidiary here are often individually ludicrous, like when they're talking about the conspiracy theory of evil people using this to manipulate or whatever. But I also just want to advance the general claim in the best case for this argument, it's just not true. Because people with eidetic memories that exist in the world right now, that actually exist, are not automatically more moral. If anything, we told you reasons to no response as to why these people are not systematically more moral. It's because they can't have the same degree of abstract generalization away from individual experiences that is crucial to constructing a viable moral system. The last argument about gaslighting I don't think is that important because honestly it's just not that common of an experience, but also I don't think that the harmful thing about gaslighting is so much that you actually get convinced of a certain thing and therefore your like epistemic sort of perfection has been upended. Rather, it's about the underlying traumatic relationship or the underlying unhealthy relationship that prompts the gaslighting, and that's unlikely to change on either side of the house, unfortunately. I think that power balance retains. So let's talk about what our content was, how they responded to it, and why that's insufficient. About trauma, their responses were twofold. One, they say the defense mechanism happens anyways, and therefore you will continually remember even on our side of the house. First of all, this is horribly uncomparative in the sense that this gets worse on their side. They just don't contest the idea that viscerality does fade over time. Again, check this against your intuitions. But second of all, I think that on their side, you can't understand it because you can't draw conclusions about the trauma in a general sense. Third, and perhaps most importantly, I think it's difficult to get self-forgiveness for trauma on their side because what is so essential often in many instances is to be able to tell yourself that the trauma wasn't your fault. But if you are so obsessed with individual details and can't forget them, then you are re-traumatized again and again, and you can't go through the process of actually understanding what this traumatic event was and forgive yourself for it. This is what often survivors of trauma experience, is an inability to forgive themselves until 5 or 10 years down the line. If the memory gets extremely implanted in your brain, you can't forget it, you can't dull the visceral edge, that becomes harder, and so you become self-blaming. Now, they say on our side, you only have memory of trauma. This is just not true. There's turnover in memories that happens uniquely on our side that doesn't happen on their side. This is uncomparative. I will take closing if they have something. Opening?
You told us that you can refract memories and that you can choose which memories are more prominent. Why do you lose this ability on our side other than the thin analysis that your brain is a computer that loses hard drive space?
Because you literally cannot forget the details that are irrelevant, so you can't hierarchize information, and you therefore cannot generalize principles. Let's talk about personal improvement, which is our second claim, and this is woefully unresponded to. There's 3 things under this. One is that you can learn from mistakes better on our side of the house, because you can think about in general what happened rather than the specific errors. Like, I'm unlikely to get into graduate school. I'm going to be focused too much on like the specific score that I messed up or whatever, instead of, on their side, I would be too focused on that. On our side, I can generalize about that experience and realize that I was unprepared. Second is you don't take healthy risks because you're so associated with like the curiosity killed the cat principle. You just can't do this type of thing in the future, so you can't take healthy risks like asking the person out. But also your decision making gets way worse because you get into a deadlock where you can't evaluate between different alternatives. You get into the debater syndrome of arguing yourself into a circle on either side of different options, and you can't draw conclusions. Let's talk about narrative construction and what that means for morality. That was our third and fourth claim. They say narrative construction doesn't happen. Absolutely, it does happen. I think that crucially, what you forget is constitutive to narrative construction, i.e. what you choose to think is unimportant is therefore a reflection of your priorities in information such that you can have a coherent worldview. If you think that certain details are not important, but other details such as your belief in God is important, that is a reflection of your principle and a reflection of your ability to hierarchize and make judgments about what is important in the world. This means you also on their side can't make that the same type of judgment about moral issues because you're constantly evaluating the details that you need to forget in order to make some type of hierarchized statement about the world. That means your ability to experience life as a meaningful entity and a meaningful experience declines, and I think that's a horrible state to live in. Definitely vote for opening opposition.
Cool. I would like to thank the deputy leader of the opposition and all the speakers in the top half, and now let's move on to the bottom half of the debate, starting with member of government.
Am I audible?
Yeah.
Just a second. Okay, I'll start my speech in 3, 2, 1. Go. Panel HUJI gave you the case that there is a problem in the status quo that we can't control our memories. Although they just assume that now we can choose how to remember our memories in some reason that we don't know how. We can choose better decisions, and they believe that we can be ourselves by choosing that. They have crucial missing variant of how it's plausible that we're actually going to remember these memories in the first place when we have this condition. We are going to analyze exactly what is plausible, the plausibility of how we're going to remember these memories by showing you how we overcome biases that we have, therefore get much more rational decisions, and secondly, why we don't remember false details that our brain puts in our minds because of emotions and things we remember in status quo, and how these things leads to better relationship and better happiness as opening government and also our one. Before I do that, one point of rebuttal. So we got the case from Owo about we generalize that now we cannot generalize things because we remember every specific. But really, there's no analysis why this delta existed. Now we cannot generalize things. I think it's the opposite that happens. We think that our brains used to do schemes in order to remember things and make it easier for him to remember. Therefore, we think that the memories, although already in the status quo, are generalized anyways. The main questions here is how exactly it's generalized, if it's based on actual and true data, or it's because emotions and irrational things that make us generalize false things that makes us believe falsely what is better for us. And secondly, about all the trauma, the rebuttal will be integrated. So let's start with to explain you how I will remember these memories with HSAM and why I will overcome biases. So we think that, first of all, we think that in the status quo, people just remember things in a really biased way and not as they really happen, because we have very defensive brain in trying to remember things. We have two main biases that make us take really bad decisions. The first one is the availability bias. It means that we remember the last thing that happens to us, and we believe that it's much more likely to be the thing that will happen for us in the future. This is why when we win one time in a bet in the casino, we're trying to bet again and again and again, even though we lose a lot of money. This is exactly why when I'm in a toxic relationship, even though it's toxic for 6, 7, 8 times, and I'm abused by my spouse every time, once they give me a present, I just remember, oh, he's so cute, he bought me a present, and this is what I remember for the future relationship. The second bias is that I have a huge optimism bias. I really believe that my future is going to be much better than it really is going to be. I think this is the reason why people stay in abusive relationship when they get one present, because they believe that, oh, they won't hurt me so much again. They did it only once. It didn't hurt me so bad as it was. I can suffer it more and more. Just convince yourself that things that happen to us are going to be better in the future. Why these things are going to change, we won't have these biases that actually can make these rational decisions. First of all, we think that just the brain cannot defend me anymore from the things that happen, because I just remember in each detail. I can't remember only the last thing that happened to me and prioritize it over any other memories, because I remember every time my spouse punched me. I remember every time that I lost my money in betting in the casino or when I tried to do bad business, and therefore I can't forget these things, and I can overcome these biases by remembering every and each detail that happened. This is exactly where my decisions are getting much more rational. This is exactly where I don't stay in an abusive relationship because I remember everything that happens to me. This is exactly where I don't go to bed or do bad businesses because I know that it's not, that I'm bad at it, and I know that my likelihood of winning is very low, and I won't try to do it again and again and again because I remember every time I lost and every time something bad happened to me. The second thing, and of how we remember things differently, is that we're now not adding false details to our memories. We think, first of all, why in the status quo it's true that we're just adding a lot of false details and don't remember things as they happen. We think that in the status quo, our brain is really horrible in remembering facts. Therefore, the way of memory that the brain has in the status quo is to remember emotions. For example, if I have bad memories, I replicate the fear that I felt in this specific moment. I replicate the sadness I feel when somebody that is close to me has died. In good occasions, I just remember my 6-month trip in Southeast Asia as like the pure happiness, the best thing that happened to me. I really don't remember the specifics of what happened. I much more remember the emotions and not the details of what really happened. Now, why we think that when I remember emotions, that should make me add details that are not true and are pretty radical. First of all, my brain has mechanisms on radicalizing the emotions that I felt when the time passes by. We think that when I have these strong emotions, I remember that I feared in some moment. The brain is trying to justify why I felt this way. It's trying to justify why it was so frightening in this moment that I remember it again and I think about it again and again. This is exactly why our brain does this expensive thing that adding details to make it more frightening and more frightening as long as the time passing by. As long as the emotion is stronger, the details that we add are more and more false. This is the second thing that when I compromise my feelings to others that had similar occasions. For example, other people with PTSD and traumas and things like that. My brain is trying to make my feel as the same as they had. Therefore, when they tell me details about what made them being so frightened, what made them feel so bad, I try to my brain just do this defensive thing or believe that the same things happened to me, and I start to believe in a lot of false things didn't really happen. Before I continue, I'll take opening.
You talk about schemas to prioritize information. This is literally our case because a schema is built upon dropping certain pieces of information and thus reflecting a hierarchy.
Exactly, it's your case, but you just assume that the schemas are bad in the status quo. Now they are better. We show you that the schemas were doing just make us remember false details and make us make bad decisions. Now, the second thing is just. So we think that for these reasons, we think that the emotions just take a lot of our thought about what the things that happen, and we add more and more details that didn't really happen. Now, why? And these things exactly make our trauma much higher and much stronger because we believe that we feared much more than we really did. This is exactly why I can never achieve the happiness I felt in Thailand, and I tried to do it again and again because I believe it was pure happiness, even though it wasn't that good. How these things are changing? First of all, O just agrees that we have don't remember this emotion so strong and actually remember the details of what happened. But moreover, we just can't radicalize what I feel. I can't remember actually what happened and what was frightening. I can remember what was happy and to make it happen again. The impact of that is extremely important because I make better decisions for myself. And second, I just can be more happy and I release myself from emotions that are bad for me at all. For this reason, we feel it's much better for us to have that. These
Cool. I would like to thank the member of government for their speech. I would like to invite the member of opposition to deliver their speech. Hear, hear.
Can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
The way CO will approach this debate is in the following manner. Firstly, we will break the deadlock that we're experiencing in debate currently that stems from the fact that all of the teams in this debate seem to attribute a whole bunch of other things to the purpose to the description of remembering more than you remembered before. What do I mean by this? There's a tendency in this debate to assume that you can remain in a certain color of the memory, that you're able to control the memory, that you're able to put out the perspective that you had of the memory, all kind of like additional statements to the way memory works in this debate. What we'll provide is analysis that's based purely on the fact that you remember more as a function of quantity, nothing else. What we mean by this is, look, the way memory works is you walk around, you see cues, you're able to respond to them, and the difference between the person on one side of the debate and the other is purely in the fact that more cues cause more responses to happen, but secondly, more cues cause a different plethora of circumstances to bring back to your memory. And that is the leanest analysis that won't need the assumption of any other property in this debate. So it will be a strategically superior one. But secondly, we will provide analysis that will apply to the most of the people most of the time. And you can title it as the tale of the ordinary life. What do we mean by this? Is that most of the people live lives that are pretty uninteresting in a sense that, there's not terribly bad stuff happening, but also not terribly good stuff happening either. More so, we would argue, it is the tendency that lives are moderately shitty in this world. What do I mean by this? It is not the worst circumstances of trauma that happen to most of the people, but most of the people in this world live in developing countries, live all around the world, where circumstances aren't great, with extraordinary experiences aren't abundant, and where their lives are not exceptional in any particular way. We say this is the light within which you need to view this debate, because this is the one in which we tackle the most people most of the time. Now, why is it important that people do not remember everything in this circumstance? Firstly, we say that the feeling of personhood and the feeling of some kind of identity stems from the intuition that we are in a certain way unique, that our experiences are certainly as a protagonist in a movie. The question is, how do we do that? We do that by not remembering all the banal circumstances of our life, like how we went for a cigarette, how we moved around, what happened that day. We only remember the important part that happened, and this is what brings us the kind of feeling that it is exceptional. We don't remember all the other ordinary lifestyle of waking up and cooking and going to the washroom. All of those things are erased, but we remember the euphoric specific circumstance, and that gives us a feeling of uniqueness and some type of protagonism. Even furthermore, this is what gives us the feeling of euphoria that our life is in some way good. If we remember a particular date with a person, and we only remember the good parts, and we only remember the not necessarily good parts, but remarkable parts for us in that particular moment, that gives a uniqueness to the situation and separates it from the rest of the life. In other words, the problem of our lives, if we remember everything, is this radical monotonicity and the radical feeling that nothing exceptional doesn't happen at any point, because in some way they follow one another in an extremely similar manner. So what we say is, by being able to prioritize some things over others, we're able to feel better about ourselves, because we can see ourselves as protagonists, propping up our personhood to begin with. But secondly, what we tell you is, when you make choices about your future life, you're better able to say, you know, I'm going to invest my time in this rather than the other, because we are expecting this kind of euphoric feeling again. Otherwise, it just seems an infinite choice of like opportunity costs, where things are going to be relatively similar of us eating breakfast and eating dinner every day anyway. So what we tell you is, look, uniqueness of circumstance of our lives comes from the ability to extract the specific circumstances we care about in our ordinary life, not in special circumstances, and forget the monotonicity that is a condition of our existence. But secondly, that is important to our extension is that, you know, we don't exist in a vacuum, right? It's not just about how I remember to, you know, remember the world around me, but how the world around me responds to the fact that I'm able to remember everything. And that's the second part of our extension. How does the person that has this condition exist in a world when this is not the commonality? Do we have two pieces here? Firstly, about how we feel about other people. We would suggest that the way people can cope with one another is when they have a tendency to forget everything, not some things that happen, but even more so, it is the asymmetry of remembrance that causes the exclusive harm here. What do I mean by here is, when this is literally flipping the OG's point about gaslighting, right? The trick is that other people wholeheartedly, with honest heart, will tell you stories about what they did and what happened in circumstances, but you will know that was not the case. Your life will feel like a lie relatively to people that just honestly cannot remember things, but you're able to remember the exact circumstance. You won't be able to understand the uniqueness of their experience, but also the protagonism of it when you're unable to experience yourself. And this has two consequences. One, it is that you feel that other people are cheating you, but even more so, you feel radically alienated from everyone else that exists in this manner. And that's the problem of people, right? That have this condition. They feel like that they're somehow different from everyone else, but also that they prioritize things in such a radically different manner that they don't exist why people feel so special, and they don't understand why people feel so different from so unique from everyone else. So we're saying the pure function of the fact that your maximization, whatever that be, however you resolve that on opening, is radically different than everyone else's. And that's a problem, because world suddenly seems as not honest to you anymore. So note, what we specifically bring you here is a mechanism that applies to most of the people, most of the time, no matter how traumatic or good their experiences are. We say the problem is the monotonicity that's battled by the uniqueness of our memory, and the relation with other people is built through common experience rather than solitary understanding of what happened. This is why this is the leanest, cleanest analysis without any additional assumptions that have been thrown around in this debate. Vote closing opposition.
Cool. I would like to thank the member of opposition for their speech, and would now like to invite the government whip to deliver their speech. Hear, hear.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Great. I'm going to start in 3, 2, 1. Look, panel, our extension is very, very simple. We are the only team who explain how memories work today and how in the process of remembering things today, we don't remember them as they were, but we insert false details. We insert false emotion. We insert false narratives and things to help match the point of view we are looking at today. When CO attack us and say, people are just assuming you can decide perspective, they are ignoring the fact that you cannot decide perspective today. They are just assuming the perspective today is good for you for some reason, and we think that is just false for reasons that Lior explained. We explained why, first of all, you do literally remember more details. Details are in the motion. But second of all, Lior explains why remembering details helps combat the false details that would have been inserted there thanks to schemas and thanks to rationalization and attempts to legitimize emotion that my brain is doing. This means that if there was a traumatic event, or if there was, not even a traumatic event, a good event, my brain inserts false memories and forgets some of the other things to justify the emotional reaction I have to it. Remembering specific details combats exactly that and allows me to build narratives and generalizations based on truth and not based on how I feel in that moment and what narrative I have towards those moments. Before I go into A, how memories work, and B, how that impacts decisions, and C, how that impacts trauma, a few responses to CO's case. First of all, they have this entire case on how we need to be able to feel unique in order to have a meaning in our life. Look, this falls directly into our side of this debate. When we only remember emotions and we only remember big generalizations of experience, that's what makes me exactly like everyone else. A million other people went to my same school. A million other people took the exact same trip and climbed the exact same mountains in Nepal that I climbed up. A million other people were in the same unit in the army. A million other people were at this exact same debate competition. All of these people had almost exactly the same experiences. The only thing that makes me different for them are the details of each of those experiences that was unique to me. The more of those details I forget, the less that experience is unique and the less uniqueness I feel in this world. I want to feel unique, therefore the more details I remember and I know exactly what differentiates and exactly what made me happier, sadder, or was different from me between other people, that is what makes me unique and that is what gives me my meaning and feeling in life. If what CO wants is uniqueness, we achieve that far better on our side than on their side, and that falls directly to us. Their second case, which is in tension with this uniqueness case, because they tend to say that the more unique I am, the less I feel a part of society, but even taking that, look, it bases on the assumption that for some reason I have no social understanding and don't know how to not be a dick about how well I remember things, right? It means that I am literally going to tell people and remind people again and again everything that they don't remember and go into detail in a way that is going to make them feel bad and not want to be around me and not trust me. Look, I think most of us want to be functioning members of society. I think even if I do that once or twice, I realize that it is bad for me, and therefore I stop doing that to my friends, stop reminding them just how much they don't know. And maybe, yes, maybe I do tell them I remember all these things, but I use that in order to put emphasis on the unique experience that we have with each other, as opposed to just general experience we remember that I have with literally every other friend, and that makes me not unique. Which means as long as I'm not a dick about it and I kindly remind them of things and I just don't go into exacerbating detail about every little thing, I think I'm still going to be a functioning member of society, but member of society. Let's go very quickly into clashes about how memories work. Look, OG opening half of an issue when each one analyzes only the side of the motion that is relevant to them. OG analyzes to us why analyzes why not having these strong emotions might be good. tried to analyze why not having these emotions is bad, but neither of them analyze like the actual comparative about what happens today, and that is what Lior gives you. Tried to say the following. Look, they're trying to have their cake and eat it too, right? They're saying that you focus on annoyances when it's your mother and like you can't create a relationship with her, but also you only focus on the most perfect day and on one score, and that is why like you cannot do good things. They cannot both say I focus only on annoyance and on good things. You know what they're actually telling you there? What they're telling you there is that what you remember are strong emotions, and that is the only thing you can actually remember. And they claim that that is necessary to make generalizations and narratives, but have no analysis on why those generalizations and narratives are like good things to have and not just things that put you into, that lock you down and don't let you make generalizations based on what actually happened. They say that you can't create, that any narrative you do create is dogmatic, but they ignore the fact that the narratives you create today are also dogmatic, because everything you're remembering in a way that consolidates the beliefs you already have, and remembering it in a way that fills in the blanks to just rationalize and legitimize feelings you already have. Then they say that when they try to explain to us why you can't process info, first of all, I just want to point out, if you can't process any extra information, you default to status quo, and there are literally no more harms than there is in status quo today. But like, we also just don't think that's true. Maybe you're not going to remember literally every single little thing, but you're going to remember an abnormally large amount of details compared to other people. And those details are going to be able to combat the fake details that might come otherwise. And then you're going to be obsessed with details that don't matter. We say these details do matter, and they are better than the false details you're going to be recreating in your head otherwise. When it comes to OG, all they say is that like, for some reason, emotions, you focus on the bad and negative things, and they don't analyze why that's actually true or bad. And that is analysis that Lior tells you when he explains to you the actual biases you have and the actual reasons that your memories today are not to be trusted and will exacerbate bad situations. What does this mean about decisions? OJ talk about the agency to construct narratives and recognize toxicity. Wait, before I continue, I will take opening.
The problem with your extension is that most of the world is not delusional. It's not clear why false details matter if I can have a stable sense of self and actually have relationships, because I'm not constantly remembering.
If you had actually analyzed why remembering more means not having an ability to generalize or have narratives at all, sure, but you didn't do that except for saying no processing capability. Okay, so we'll focus on slightly less details, and I'll be able to make generalizations just based on more data points. What does that mean? That we explain why we are actually able to make more rational decisions and what that actually leads to. It means that I will not gamble again because it's not. I'm not like clouded by availability and recency bias. I will not stay in a toxic relationship just because the more positive, visceral emotions are there. I will not stay in an abusive job even though they're paying me more, and I will not fixate on recreating the perfect day in a way that doesn't allow me to continue. Notice how this generalizes to trauma, right? Because when we explain to you that when you replicate experience, you're also exacerbating your narratives and your beliefs about it, it means that every time you're remembering it, you are exacerbating the traumatic experience. You are remembering more blood than there was. You are remembering more fear than there was. You are remembering more pain than there was. And you are also consolidating the narratives you have, which means that they're harder to break. So if I believed that I was to blame, I'm going to remember things in a way that exacerbates that belief. Because we show you an actual analysis on how memories work and why when we change that, we actually get to better rational decisions, what the impacts of that are on trauma and happiness, we win this debate.
Cool. I would like to thank the government whip for their speech, and would like to invite the opposition whip to wrap up the debate. Here.
Can you hear me, Julia?
Yeah.
Can I have a stopwatch, guys? Anyone? There's this really stupid philosopher who said, if a tree falls in a forest and no one hears it or sees it, has it really fallen? Government is a bit worse. You see the tree falling, you hit the tree falling, and then everyone else says, nope, the forest is still there. The problem with government bench is that they fail to realize that this could be a borderline mental illness as it's treated in society, where you're the only person who goes around telling their friends that you did say that to her, or you did do that to him, or you were part of that job application, or you were part of that class. Your consistent life is spent fact-checking people and keep thinking that they're lying, that they can't be trusted, that they aren't honest, which means that you're fundamentally isolated as an individual. That's something that's very important for government bench to understand. Secondly, the entire intuition along government bench sort of falls because of this thing called the DPM transitivity in psychology. Let me explain what that shit means. So DPM means data, perspective, motivation. So they're at step 1, but they're arguing step 3. Let me explain. So let's just say you have lots of data, right? Like you know everything that happened to you, Professor Xavier from X-Men, you have all of the data around you on television screens. That doesn't at all affect your perspective on what that data is, because it's not just about remembering what had happened, it's also remembering what you were feeling and thinking about what had happened, which is a fundamentally different thing. But then the third step is even worse, which they never analyze. Knowing the data and the perspective on the data leads to motivation and action. Why? Lots of people know that they are beaten up by their husbands. They stay in those abusive relationships. Lots of people remember seeing a cow slaughtered in front of them at the age of 6. They're still not fucking vegetarian. So cognitive dissonance, basically, is all I'm saying, is a universal thing. So it's extremely unclear to me why on government bench, just because you know things, and even if I can charitably assume that you have perspectives on those things, why that ever leads to any given change in behavior. Truth is not a value in and of itself. The third thing that I want to point out, again, is that the only universalizable thing that anyone's talked about in this debate is Anna's thing. And I'll tell you why. Jacqueline does this brilliant thing in opening government where she says, we understand that people have subjective psychological states, and then goes on to say everyone who compartmentalizes has depression. So only one of those things can be true, right? And this whole problem exists with opening opposition and closing government as well. On closing government, always knowing what is true is always good for you. On opening opposition, not knowing these things can cause trauma or not cause trauma. Like these are all subjective psychological states. Like it's unclear which one of those is true. I can always have a counterexample for which one is or isn't. The only thing that's universally true is that most of our lives are pretty fucking meaningless. I just think that's important for people to understand. But what happens is that you try to give them meaning. You try to say, there was something important that happened in my life today. That date I had last week, she is the one and we are the ones. These are the sort of feelings that you have to keep yourself going. Because let's get straight, right? Like not everyone's Mark Zuckerberg, not everyone's Greta Thunberg. There's maybe 1,000 people on the planet who are somewhat leading interesting lives. Everyone else is pretty fucking boring. How does government's world fit in here? When I think about, oh no, my parents had a divorce and this shaped me as an individual and no one's ever had that experience and the courtroom was completely silent. And I remember, fuck, there was a guy farting in the back when they were announcing the divorce settlement. Oh no, the judge sort of forgot my name. These banal and ordinary details make life really fucking stupid for me, because no longer is this the departure of the two people I love most in my life who will forever shape my ideas of separation and want me to fight for social justice in Pakistan. I'm talking about a friend. It's now about like, you know, someone farted in a courtroom and my parents got divorced. So the banal absurdity of life is the only thing holding us back from legitimate depression, right? But what these people do is that they allow you to remember every fucking thing. That date I went where we went like, you know, on the most romantic date ever on the Thames, I had Cheetos that morning and I spilled some on my sweater. I now remember that. Like, do you understand how insanely absurd that is in terms of giving any happiness to any individual? I hope that makes sense. Opening government, why not?
So closing government's analysis relies on the fact that having more detailed memories means you are also able to rationally interpret them, which does not follow. Our impacts rely simply on balancing the amounts of negative and happier memories and benefits of having the details in the first place, which the motion actually does bear.
But Lucy, so this is the problem. So the problem with this is that you can't say that people have subjective psychological states and then argue objectively most people only remember negative memories. Like I can give you structural reasons why the opposite is true. For instance, neuropsychological studies indicate that you often forget memories completely and they don't have knockoff impacts on your physiology simply because you want to guarantee the body's well-being. It's one of the many reasons why people don't remember child molestation ever and often don't have knockoff impacts of it. So like, again, I don't understand why you can pick a very specific thing that you think is objectively true for everyone and then say, look, it's objectively true, hence we win the debate. Let me go on. The fourth thing that I want to then talk about, having talked about how lonely you feel, having talked about how boring everyone's existence is this intuition about gaslighting, which I think is equally important. Now, opening opposition validly points out that you sort of feel gaslit, and then opening government does the same thing. It's a wash. Let me add a response here which makes it different. in a world where people can have HSAM, why won't people in power structures, like for instance, that boss who tried to harass you 2 weeks ago, say, no, I promise it happened the way I think it happened because I have HSAM. In a world where this thing exists, people in power structures can just openly lie about it and gaslight you with the existence of a thing that government is literally advocating. Every single person with a power structure will say, don't worry, I have a perfect memory. I remember exactly how this happened. You definitely don't. The final thing I want to talk about is closing government, because closing government has this strange idea, right? So it's sort of like Harvard's motto. So Harvard's motto is veritas, right? Like truth, which sort of implies that truth is a good thing. I'm not sure why that's a priori the case. And that's the closing government case as well, that like, believing false facts is bad for you. I genuinely don't know why. One, we've shown to you false facts showed you the absurd ordinariness of your life. Two, they make you feel fundamentally lonely. But those are just like prospective, stupid debate reasons, right? Like there's so much uncertainty in the world that could just be not knowing everything is as good as knowing everything. So so the impact that they didn't analyze, they did a good job of proving why you get to the truth, but they never proved why knowing the truth at all makes you happy, or why knowing the truth at all in any ethical or normative sense is important. Look, I thought this would be a dramatic semifinal, and I'll probably think about this 10 years from now. But right now, if 10 years from now, if I remember I was chucking a fucking paper ball at a friend of mine while I was speaking, it makes it less dramatic. Please don't make me remember these banal things. Let me feel like the hero of my own story. I am the master of the universe. Very proud to oppose.
Cool. I would like to thank the opposition whip for their speech and all of the speakers in the semifinal, and congratulate them once again for reaching it. I think that obviously, yes, we're all leaving the meeting. If someone could stop the live stream so we can have a discussion, that would also be lovely. If not, we're going to move to Discord. See you all guys after the announcements.
Good luck, guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Is it possible that the moderator of this building turns off the stream? Because if not, we can just move to an arbitrary room on Discord. Okay, I don't think the person is here. Just to not waste any time, how about we just move to the, like, I don't know, the room 3 on Discord? Does that sound okay?
Sorry, which room?
3.
Okay.
Sure. Sure.
All right. See you there.
3 it is again.